Our life is twofold. Sleep hath its own world, a boundary between the things misnamed, death and existence. Sleep hath its own world, and a wide realm of wild reality, and dreams in their development have breath, and tears and tortures, and the touch of joy. They leave a weight upon our waking thoughts, they take a weight from off our waking toils. They do divide our being. They become portion of ourselves as of our time, and look like heralds of eternity. They pass like spirits of the past. They speak like sibyls of the future. They have power. The tyranny of pleasure and of pain. They make us what we were not, what they will, and shake us with the vision that's gone by, the dread of vanished shadows. Are they so? Is not the past all shadow? What are they? Creations of the mind? The mind can make substance and people planets of its own with beings brighter than have been, and give a breath to forms which can outlive all flesh. It is during this time of year, when the light dwindles and its radiant heat no longer licks our skin, that one becomes enamored of the dark. The shortened days and the expanding nights bring us closer to the hearth, surrounded by the warm, comforting firelight in the company of others. In the English tradition, for instance, many ghost stories are read during this time of year, and there is something ancient to this association between winter solstice, encroaching night, and the world of dreams, populated by ghosts and the dead. But despite our need to retain warmth and be in the presence of light, there is an equally strange and familiar intimacy evoked by the ever-present, dream-laden darkness. Victorians were not only obsessed with the ghost story, but also the occult implications of newly emerging scientific discoveries, mingled with ancient theories of paranormal activity. The 19th century saw the rise of spiritualism as a movement, and one of its main focal points was the seance. We have always maintained a skeptical attitude to such claims, and many rationalists and atheists took a distinct pleasure in exposing the charlatanism of many who claimed certain mediumistic powers during a seance, who perhaps swindled the all-too gullible and credulous populace. There is, of course, something vile about taking advantage of the emotions of a grieving or mourning individual, promising to put them into touch with loved ones only to simply dupe them and pilfer their pockets. It'd be remiss of me to suggest that this is simply a modern phenomenon, however. Accusations from skeptics and rationalists have always plagued the true believer, even in antiquity. In spiritualist circles, there is a term called an apport, and typically it is understood as an object of whatever sort, however common, that is provided as a gift from the spirit to the attendee of the seance. There is a rather gleeful Wikipedia entry on apports, whose author seems to take particular delight in exposing its practitioners as fraudulent, claiming that, quote, no medium or psychic has demonstrated the manifestation of an apport under scientifically controlled conditions. The poem by Lord Byron at the beginning of this video illustrates the strange borderland between the dream and waking reality that would ultimately question the radical alterity between this world and the divine. What are they, he asks, creations of the mind? The mind can make substance, and people planets of its own with beings brighter than have been, and give a breath to forms which can outlive all flesh. The mind that can make substance is the theme of this video. We will take one particular myth that speaks of a terras, which Louis Garnet describes as involving, quote, the idea of a religious force that can be concentrated in the thing. This thing being some sort of precious object. Not only is this precious object animated by feelings like the mysterious, the frightening, or the marvelous, but it is a physical object that is literally transferred from the divine realm to the mortal realm. The photo-based artist and author Shannon Taggart was first introduced to spiritualism after her cousin, quote, received a message from a medium that revealed details about her grandfather's death. Intrigued by this message, which occurred in the famous hamlet of Lilydale, New York, she went to investigate the site itself, with the intent perhaps to debunk the practitioners or to uncover the real mechanisms that were being employed, outside, of course, of paranormal considerations. Her investigations brought her through a labyrinth of discoveries and realizations, and 18 years later, her book Seance was published, which includes 150 of her original photographs from spiritualist practitioners across the United States, United Kingdom, and Europe. This book contains some shocking pictures, particularly the production of a substance called ectoplasm, which apparently is of a nature that is both spiritual and material, and yet it should really come as no surprise that such things are indeed possible. The purpose of this video is not to convince you of the veridical nature of communication with ghosts or the reality of seances, but to explore this in-between state between the divine and mortal worlds. My interest is fundamentally in what can arise from the dream. In 464 BC, Pindar composed Olympian 13 to celebrate Xenophon of Corinth's double Olympian victory. In it, Pindar evokes many famous Corinthians, giving praise to their intelligence and cunning. One of the mythic heroes of Corinth included Bellerophon. The reason why we're interested in this excerpt is because this is one of our earliest instances of an ancient apport, where an object is transferred from one world to the next, but in this instance, through a dream. The story is as follows. Bellerophon of Corinth was weighed down by many murders he had committed, and sought out refuge from the king of Tiryns, named Proteus. During his stay in Proteus's realm, his wife Antea falsely accused Bellerophon of trying to seduce her. The king was enraged, but because Bellerophon had come to him as a suppliant, this sacred duty could not be stained by Proteus having him murdered. So instead, the king sent him to Antea's father Iobates, accompanied by a secret note asking him to do away with the hero for having attempted to violate his daughter. Iobates decided that he himself could not destroy such a distinguished royal guest, and asked Bellerophon to help slay the dragon Chimera. Of course, as a hero, Bellerophon agreed, but had to take counsel with the seer Polyidus in order to discover how to do this. Polyidus told him that he must first capture the flying horse Pegasus, but now he faces a problem. How does one catch a winged horse? For the first time in ancient antiquity, Pindar relates a story of a mortal who has actively chosen to seek out a dream in the religious context of an incubation shrine. The seer, Polyidus, tells him to go to the altar of Athena and to sleep there overnight, with the intention of perhaps having a divine guidance communicated in a dream. As expected, Pallas Athene appears to the dreaming Bellerophon and addresses him with the customary visitational dream formula, employing the term Eudeus to assure the recipient is asleep. The passage says, quote, "Until the maiden goddess Pallas brought to him a bit with its golden headstall, and his dream at once turned to a waking vision. She spoke forth, quote, 'Are you sleeping, prince of Iolus's race? Come, take this charmer of horses, and sacrificing a white bull to your father the horse-tamer, show it to him.' So it seemed that the maiden of the dark Aegis had spoken to him as he slept, and he leapt straight to his feet and seized the marvelous bit that lay beside him, and joyfully sought out the seer of the land." As observed by Stephanie Holton, what we are witnessing is a transgression of the boundaries of the divine and mortal spheres. In this one moment, the product of the dream world materializes a physical object. There is a blending between the onar, the dream, and the hupar, which is the waking reality. The Hippocratics, along with many Presocratic thinkers, had incredibly divergent ways to make sense of dreams, along with the processes involved in falling asleep. But there are a few underlying trends that recur in their theories. The major one I'd like to discuss is the idea of a gradation of states, from wakefulness to sleep, and then to death. Heraclitus, for instance, attributed this transition of states to varying degrees of light. For example, when we are all awake, we are participating in the shared fiery logos of the universe. But upon closing our eyes, our sight is, quote, extinguished, apospesteis, and we descend into the darkness of our own inner private world, devoid, for the most part, of the logos that allows for a rationally ordered cosmos. In other Presocratics, we are introduced to a more physiological notion of this gradation of states of consciousness. The dimming light is then substituted for decreasing heat and the increase of cold. As Alcmaeon of Croton notes, sleep is brought about by the retreating of blood into the veins, and as the blood and its heat recede, the cold increases, until at last, if the process is not reversed, the subject dies. According to Tertullian's commentary, both Empedocles and Parmenides saw sleep as a cooling off. Moving from the blood to the air, it is the Presocratic physiologist Diogenes of Apollonia who based his notions entirely on air and its qualities, where the increase of moisture in the air slows down the processing of the body so that sleep and drunkenness result. In this sense, Diogenes of Apollonia revivified the archaic Homeric notion that air is the divine life-giving principle. One of the most interesting and, dare I say, haunting theories for me is from Democritus. Both Democritus and Leucippus went against the grain of many thinkers and saw the source of dreams arising from without rather than from within, even though this was contrary to much of the discussions which situated the source of dreams in human physiology and human psychology. Democritus and Leucippus managed to reinstate the validity of archaic and classical literary conceptions. In essence, by acknowledging external and objective sources of dreams, they managed to conform their theories with the notions of personified deities like Hypnos and Oinos. Although Leucippus believed that sleep was primarily a bodily phenomenon, absent any involvement from the psyche, this materialist perspective somehow provides an eerie sort of interaction with the world that makes physical and embodied things possess a certain level of intimacy with inner images that come to one at night. As Holton explained, according to Democritus, Idola are, quote, films of atoms emanating from objects. And as Walter Burkhardt explains, there were three factors that brought about an appearance of these idola. There first had to be a medium between the object and the eye. This would be the ever-present air. Secondly, there would be a modification of the air by the object. And thirdly, some means of transport from the object to the eye. Burkhardt further explains that since fire atoms were the smallest and quickest atoms in existence, they were being constantly emitted by all sources of light, and as they'd hit the air, they'd produce what was known as a condensation. Light would condense the air in order for it to receive imprints and transport those imprints to the eye. What is particularly strange about this concept is that the idola are emitted not only by animate things but inanimate as well, objects like furniture or tools. The eidolon is also a word used to refer to a ghost. In this sense, we can say that what we see in dreams are the ghosts of objects and beings that we encounter as leftover images in the mind. In Book 8 of Plutarch's Questiones Convivales, the character Favorinus is quoted as saying, "Not only do they have the same shape as the bodies they are modeled on, but they also take on impressions of the motions and desires of each person's soul, their character and emotions. When they collide with people with all these things, they talk like they're alive and tell those who receive them the opinions, thoughts, and impulses of those who set them loose." Holton observes this startling realization that Favorinus is not only claiming that the idola physically replicate their origins, but that they also, quote, contain psychological information that can be passed on to the dreamer. And the emotional intensity of some dreams, and those that often linger upon waking, along with thoughts, are of this nature of the idola as well, since they are also composed of atoms. Therefore, a saying of Democritus can come into full comprehension given our discussion just now. Opsis ton adolon to phenomena. Phenomena are the vision, the visible aspect of things that are not revealed to view. Returning to Pindar, Holton notes that this 5th century BC poet held a view similar to those attributed to the Orphics and Pythagoreans. This is because Pindar is recorded as saying that in some manner, dreams are associated with the workings of the soul. Plutarch in his Consolation to Apollonius quotes a lament for the dead by Pindar. Quote, "And while the body of all men is encumbered by overpowering death, a living eidolon of life, yet remains, for it alone is from the gods. But it sleeps while the limbs are active. Yet to the sleeping, in many dreams, it shows an interpretation of future delights and pains. If the eidolon remains in an active state while the individual sleeps, and is only brought into passivity upon waking, then whatever imagery experienced by Bellerophon at the sanctuary of Athena managed to materialize a concrete physical object. As Louis Garnet notes, quote, "The object comes from the world beyond, a world that is alternately the realm of dream and the underworld region of the oracular hero." According to work of Pausanias in the 2nd century AD, there was a sanctuary dedicated to Athena with the epithet Kalinites, of the bit. Pausanias says, quote, "Athena was, they say, the deity who gave assistance of the most practical kind to Bellerophon, particularly in presenting him with Pegasus, after she, with her very own hand, had tamed him and broken him into the bit. After the horse bit is sent to the hero from Athena, he is to perform a sacrifice and to dedicate an altar to Athena Hippia. Garnet notes that both Athena Hippia and Poseidon Hippios shared a common domain in the land of Corinth. This domain is that of the horse, with its natural power, and the Kalinites, or horse bit, that reins in the horse's unbridled power and directs it via the appropriate channels for civilizational ends. Before we move on to elucidate the nature of Athena's gift, it is important to understand what the Pegasus represents. But first, let us observe this famous painting by Henry Fuseli, entitled Nightmare, for it may provide a clue. On the left corner, you can see that a black horse with deeply unsettling white opaque eyes. They are almost unseeing and uncomprehending. Many people assume that the word nightmare is simply a play on the word night and mare being a female horse. And this is perhaps how the artist himself understood it. Mare is equally a demonic entity. But although there is no etymological justification for identifying mare as a female horse with mare a demonic entity, there is a correspondence that still speaks to the terrifying nature of the horse and its demonic nature. Pegasus emerged from the blood of the decapitated Medusa in an oceanic location where, quote, chthonic waters spurt forth, is quoted by Marcel Detienne, quote, in the leap which carries him from the chthonic depths of the world of Oranos to which he gains entry as the bearer of Zeus's lightning and thunderbolts. Bellerophon's steed encompasses the whole spectrum of representations, a spectrum which incorporates the essential characteristics of Poseidon Hippios, the horse seen as a chthonic power, orientated towards the underworld and the powers of fertility which reside in fresh water and gushing springs. The horse, as swift as lightning, associate the winds, clouds, and storms. The horse seen as a bellicose animal and a power in war. The horse is a blind, instinctual power, capable of incredible destruction and unbridled animalistic energy and passion. It is therefore no surprise that in his treatise on horsemanship Xenophon uses the adjective gorgos to describe something, quote, terrible, alarming, to describe a nervous and mettlesome beast. Those who are familiar with the horse's skittishness and ability to rear up and flee at a moment's provocation or to trample a human with its bulging eyes may begin to understand how this demonic force was perceived by the ancients. It needed to be controlled or subdued. But Detienne also reminds us that it is important to recognize that the word gorgos also applied, quote, to the flashing of armor, the dazzling virtuosity of the athlete, or the warrior frenzy which transforms the human face. With regard to the human, Detienne observes that previous scholars had drawn a connection between, quote, the frenzied horse, the gorgon, and the man who is possessed. A man who is possessed is ridden by a mysterious power which, quote, bridles him, and the inarticulate sounds emitted by certain epileptics are reminiscent of that frightening laughter that the neighing of the horse appears to be, while their convulsed features seem to reflect the mask of the gorgon. Xenophon is quoted directly as saying, "Those who are possessed have the monstrous looks of the gorgon, a terrifying voice and superhuman strength." Therefore, in order to magically counterbalance the supernatural strength and power of the horse and ultimately Poseidon's Hippios, we have need of Athena's cunning intelligence, as the counteracting force of Athena Hippias or Athena Kalinites. In the 13th Olympian, Pindar uses terms like philtron or pharmakon or teras. He also uses the concept of metra. This philtron or pharmakon is a spell or potion or antidote representing the horse's bit that will soothe or keep in check the elemental forces unleashed by the horse. This is a magical object born from the flames. It is literally purigenes, and it is a fire contained within the metallic object that counteracts the fiery nature of the horse. Another one of its attributes is agrupnos, which means that it never sleeps. Ultimately, this technological and magical device given by Athena is used as a metra, which has the connotation of measure and moderation. It is easy to assume that because Athena and Poseidon are operating in the same domain of mounted charioteer or horseman, that they are in conflict or at odds with one another. To make that assumption would be to see nothing but hostility among the gods themselves. This cannot be the case. For although Poseidon is a master of horses and can therefore command the horse and the chariot, there is a point where his powers cease to function with total monarchical rule. And that is a place where Athena's artifice is encountered. It is the technical and magical power of the horse's bit, along with the cleverness and intelligence of the horse rider, that Poseidon's power is curbed and redirected, so that both gods and their energies are held in mutual tension and synergy. In line with polycentric polytheistic metaphysics, each god is a witness to all the other gods. They are present, all to each and each to all. This propriety regarding the prerogatives of the gods and the intimacy of their relations can be exemplified by Athena's acknowledgement of Poseidon's inherent jealousy. And because she deeply understands Poseidon's sensitivities regarding the boundaries of his timai, she reminds Bellerophon not to forget to sacrifice a white bull in honor of Poseidon Damios, while presenting Pegasus bridled and utilizing the bit. At last, our hero, having received the necessary magical object from a dream at an incubation shrine, managed to bridle Pegasus and finally destroy the chimera. Perhaps those who discredited the spiritualist seances and who saw themselves as defenders of rationalism and the overly credulous and gullible attendees were in fact doing a grave disservice to them. Perhaps it is precisely these types of visitations and the materializations of certain objects of power from one realm to another, however insignificant to the common eye, that provided precisely that pharmakon necessary to defeat their own personal chimeras. Take care for now.